Hey, I'm Dorenton, and this is my intro crystal guide. With the new solo queue and non-lethals coming out, I wanted there to be a resource available for newer players looking to get started. Crystals are Albion's most competitive and, in my opinion, fun content, and they're the reason I still play the game after all these years. For now, this video is going to be a standalone video meant for newer and intermediate players, but if there's a demand for it, I will make some videos on more advanced topics such as specific weapons, roles, or maybe how to play and play against certain comps. I'm going to go ahead and start with a 1-minute rundown literally of how to play the crystals, as now there's going to be a new 24/7 queuable league, which you can access by clicking on the scroll up here, click Arena, Crystal, select your role, and sign up. This is queuable 24 hours a day and can be queued with 1, 2, 3, or 5 people. For premium 5s, lethal and non-lethal, you're going to go to the Realm Gate in any city, so the big shiny place up top, and talk to this mob. You go ahead and buy a token, and then whenever your team is ready to queue up, you all come to the Realm Gate, grab your token, put it in here. I don't have a team right now, but this will just be red. Click it, and then you'll be ready to go. It's very important, keep the token in your inventory, because if you put it in this bank, it'll cancel the queue. Your token is used up when the match starts, and then whoever wins the match will get a token of the next level. There are currently 9 levels, and these numbers may change, so just know that whenever you want, you can click on the token to see all the rules. You can check your item power, the amount of players, the rewards, and then finally when the next one happens. But just know that levels 1 to 3 happen every timer, and then 4s happen half as often, so they're every other day, 5s twice a week, 6 once a week, 7 every other, 8 once a month, and then 9 is once a season finally. And there's normally a tournament in between seasons. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the interesting stuff, such as combat basics. To win the crystal, you have to reduce the enemy team's points to 0. You do this through a combination of capping and killing. Capping a point reduces their points by 1, as you can see at the top we both capped our homes. And capping the point is interrupted by damage. A shield, as you see now, allows you to keep capping even if they hit you. Getting hit with any form of CC, however, will interrupt the cap still, regardless of shield or not. So normally what this means is you have to kill the enemy team first. As you're about to see, that reduces the enemy team's points by 6 for each death. And then you take the point. The point takes 7.5 seconds to cap. You can watch my W to double check the time. And then if you have more points than the enemy team, so either 1 to 0 or in this case 2 to 1, the enemy team will lose 10 points every minute. If you have all 3 points, they will lose 20 instead. Last important basic information to know is just how the tent works. I have a bubble on my character, which means that I'm immune to all damage and CC, but even with the icon on, I still am able to be swapped here if I damage the enemy. Hitting or healing another player makes you vulnerable in the tent, so just be careful dotting people or applying a heal over time effect or just hitting people in general. The tent also deals 10% max health true damage to enemies within it, but that flame does not hurt nearly as bad as the flame your teammates are going to give you for dying inside the tent. Just put a random fight here for y'all to look at while I talk here, but I wanted to start first by talking about basic ability usage in the 5v5 scene. I normally divide this up into 4 levels. Level 0 being the kind of player who holds things for excessively long. You know, I'm sure we've all played with people who just didn't use like their W for like 45 seconds, and that's obviously pretty destructive for your team. So going from level 0 to 1, I normally tell people, as counterintuitive as it sounds, just turn your brain off for a little bit and just use your abilities. Like you just throw everything at the enemy team, just off cooldown, be doing things. It's much better to just be doing something than it is to do nothing. The second level is advancing a little bit beyond that and just actually putting a little bit of thought into your abilities, making sure you're hitting the right targets, making sure like you're comboing correctly, and or like focusing the people that your teammates are focusing. And then level 3, or just like the highest level, is when you are actually planning in advance. My healer tells me that the seed is coming up in a few seconds, so I walk back, hold my Judy, and then whenever I see the seed drop onto me, I drop the Judy. Coordinating abilities with like this with your teammate is very important for winning at high level play. There are many skill shots, wildfire E, harpoons, things of that nature, where you really want your tank to guarantee the hit. And so just communicating things that are coming off cooldown to your teammates is the best thing you can do with your comms, really, because I see a lot of low-level teams kind of yelling at each other about like who they're hitting and stuff, and just things that like you should be able to see with your eyes rather than something like cooldowns, which are kind of hard to track visually, and you need people to communicate with you on. On the topic of communication as well, one thing that's very important is to call out anytime an enemy uses a defensive, just so your whole team knows. There are many times where your teammates are just off screen, or they simply may not have noticed if, for example, their Frost no longer has a blink, and therefore he's an easy target. So that's just another thing to also look out for, and especially as melee players, this tends to be more relevant. So the second to last topic that I think is worth discussing here is just basic formation as a team. Everything essentially revolves around your healer, who should be roughly in the middle of your team, with an RDPS on either side of them about their Q range away. It's very important to be maintaining this distance in a lot of metas, just essentially so you can deny the enemy tank value. It is very bad for the enemy tank to be on this RDPS and like stun through him into the healer or vice versa. Same thing with an Ironclad. You don't want him knocking out multiple backliners at the same time. Just long story short, stay spread from your healer. Now these train tracks in front of the RDPS, and yes, they are train tracks. Trust me, I drew them. Okay. This is where your RDPS are supposed to go. In complete front-to-back play, you just kite together along your train tracks. But what I would call normal RDPS play, typically whoever is being focused, so in this case we'll pretend that they're going for RDPS, and RDPS 2 is not being harassed, typically you advance up your train track into the enemy team and look to hit the enemy backline just based on whatever you can hit. This is typically like the Curse, sometimes the Expo and like Expo Frost, although most people go for the Expo at this point. But essentially, normal RDPS play is going up your train track whenever you are safe and running down it when you're not. From the front lines position, you need to be roughly within healer Q range as the tanker or the bruiser. At least when your nature stacks fall off, you come back at the stacks, then you can go out again. It's very important because most frontliners do not have very many active defenses, and most of your defensiveness comes through your armor, which I'll talk about more in the next section. But essentially, just know that like you're supposed to stay in range of your hero the whole time. This also makes it a lot easier for you to turn and punish the enemy front line if they're overextending. But just know the main subjects I really wanted to cover here is that the healer should be in the middle, and it's very important for RDPS to not cross lanes, because then your team ends up super clumped, you get hit with massive stuns, and just everything becomes a disaster pretty quickly. It can be hard to maintain this formation, especially when going around the top of the map sometimes, or if you're in a Hellgate or something like that, but just know that I cannot stress it enough, it is very, very important for people to not cross lanes. To finish out this section, I would like to add too that the tank and the bruiser don't have super specific assigned roles in this formation, but it is fairly important, especially right now in current glaive meta, but in various metas, that you are blocking skill shots for your RDPS. It helps a lot to have the tank block one lane and then the bruiser in the other. Last section, I want to talk about defensive usage. For melees, most of your defensives are fairly passive in just the fact that you have like a very high armor and magic resist value compared to a clothy of the same IP. The absolute best way to actually kill an enemy frontline or a dive comp is to actually deny them healing, which I will likely make an anti-dive video at some point in the future. But long story short, it's very hard to kill a plate user who is receiving healing the entire time. And on that note, as a melee DPS or a tank, it is very important to actually fight within the Judy if you're still receiving heals. The bonus resistances you get normally undoes any shred that may have hit you, and that 30% healing received is absolutely critical that you're getting that amplified healing received whenever there's a big healing window, such as a seed, a Graveguard helmet, maybe an orb plus a holy Q at the same time, things of that nature. Finally, the last bit of mainly positioning and a mix of defensive that I want to go over for melees is that it's very important that if you're on a target, so for example the enemy Frost here, it is very important that you actually stand on opposite sides of the target. If both melees are over here, it becomes an easy burst opportunity for me to just hit both of them the entire time, as well as things like Curse, where like the sickles can only come out one side or the other, and just generally like most RDPS, or like most comps rather, will have some form of area of effect damage that you really want to minimize. Generally speaking, for all defensives, it is very important to use your defensives in a way that mitigates the most damage rather than just using them at low health, which is a common mistake I see amongst new players. You know, Cleric Robe, Res Pot, just Inferno Shield, just any defensive you can think of is best used before you take damage rather than just doing it when you're already dangerous. In terms of specific interactions, it is very important for rolling specifically to be done the second you get kidnapped. Sometimes it is the correct play to plop your Cleric and to do damage, but 99% of the time, you should just roll first, because your roll shoes have a 20-second cooldown, and as of next patch, all of the major kidnaps that you see, so the Glavy, the Harpoon, the Fiend Sandals, they're all at 20 seconds or more if you are thinking about things such as like Knockback Helmet. When I get flung this time, I'm not going to have my roll up immediately. Similarly, Mercenary Helmet and Nature Cleanse are both 20-second cooldowns, while most tank stuns are 15. So it's very important whenever that Mercenary Hood starts ticking down to 7 or 6 second mark, you really position yourself in a place to avoid the stun in the first place, or simply not be bursted while stunned. This is also something to keep in mind on the offensive, because if you stun somebody and they cleanse it, you know for a fact that once your stun comes up, if you use it immediately off cooldown, you can have a big punish window. That's all I have for now. Didn't want the video to end up being too long. If you thought it was helpful, go ahead and feed the algorithm for me. If there's a demand for it, I'll make more videos about in-depth specific topics. And the main plug that I wanted to add is that I do offer paid coaching, so if you or your team are interested, message me via the Discord in the description. My Twitch is also down there, but I can't promise that I'll be streaming that much. Thanks.